Let's try that again. Howdy. Welcome to the Seat of Pseudology podcast. I'm Cypher. This is.
Sentient Roomba.
And?
I'm the anecdotalist. Today we're going to talk about the state of higher education, at least in the United States. Now, today or these current times are a great time to get a bachelor's degree or master's degree, even a doctorate degree online from a variety of different schools. However, what I have noticed is that there has been a great glut of different subjects which I didn't even know you could study in university, such as a master's in real estate, a master's in compliance. The As someone that went to a traditional university for undergrad and then went online for grad school, it's interesting what the experiences for higher education are right now. What is the purpose of higher education? I personally am quite snooty to all these colleges, for-profit colleges, but at the same time, in the current economic situation in the United States, you need some sort of diploma to get ahead, and it is very important that these options are available for people who did not get the opportunity prior to be able to attend a higher education institution. So these online low-cost options are great for them, but at what cost? And I feel like this question asks, what is higher education for? Is it a job school? Is it for self-enrichment? I will pass this question to my fellow pseudologists. What is the purpose of not education, but specifically higher education?
Well, I want to take the shitty take here and say self enrichment 110% every time. If you're not going for self enrichment, what's the point? In my mind. Um, but that has its own implications, right? Like, if you need it to get ahead or if you need a degree to get a job, and if that's the expectation, that immediately puts you at odds with going to school for self enrichment. However, in my very candid take, it's fuck all that. Fuck being successful, like learning for the sake of learning. But because I kind of think success will come if you apply yourself at something that you care about. Um, but I'm also kind of a little idealistic. So, what do you think, Roomba?
Yeah, that's the main divide, right? Is like, should we be sending kids to trade school so that they can learn something that's like an actual marketable skill? Or like, do we want 20,000 to say it the way like a right winger would? Like, do we want 20,000 kids with like arts and basket weaving fucking degrees because they feel it
Yeah,
because it makes them feel good, and then
yeah,
they get out with this degree and they can't do anything with it? Like, I personally agree that it should be for self-enrichment, but I'm also super privileged in that respect that I have technical skills already as a fallback. So I can kind of afford to be frivolous and like continue my philosophy degrees or whatever, and not have to worry too much, because worst case scenario, like I can fall back on my STEM degree and like my skills and experience and get a job. So that's a tough one. It really is, because in in a society with as much like excess and security as we have, although we're going through some waivers with that, we do get to a point where our basic needs are somewhat taken care of, and we can focus more on those like existential issues of like, why are we here? Like, what are we doing? What is my purpose? What like makes me feel good? Which leads to a whole ripple effect of like mental disorders and stuff too, and depression. So yeah, that's a tough one. And then the for-profit part of education too, and how much you're actually even gaining out of it, is up for debate.
yeah,
Yeah, I see. When you say for-profit, I see there were teachers that are there's two teachers in my school district. One, they're both about to graduate in with doctorates, particularly PhDs. So in education or in doctorates, you have generally two types of doctorates. You have your PhDs, right? And then you have your professional doctorates like PsyD, EDD, NGD, or something like that. They're specifically, and PhDs you can't typically do online because that's you becoming a full-time academic. So those are very much in person. You become a graduate assistant teacher, that kind of thing. But anyway, these two are graduating in from Capella University, another one from Walden, and they're both for profit. And the whole purpose of a doctorate, right, is you write a thesis and you make that defense, and you become a contributor to that field. But what does that, if it's a for profit, the motivation for them is to not fail you because you are giving them money. Your whole, I mean, this might not even apply to non-profits too, but for for-profit especially, it's going to be a cake. I'd imagine it's going to be a cakewalk to go for this program because you are essentially buying your degree. Now, even though I didn't go to a for-profit for my grad school, I went to USC, I still felt like I was buying my degree. But I just feel particularly egregious. Like, am I supposed to treat you like an actual PhD person? I mean, I guess so. I have to call them doctor, but compared to someone that did 6 years at like a old ancient university that went through all those motions, um, it's become transactional. These degrees, like buy your degree. I advocate that if university was free, a school would be motivated to fail you because they aren't making money off of you. And in some countries, like particularly in Europe and in Brazil, I know for sure, because university is free there, people that get a master's degree in those countries tend to be actual like sort of up here. Whereas in this country, people will have master's degrees, and I'm just like, to be my snooty anecdotal self, I'm just like, you don't seem like someone with a master's degree. Um, so, but then I've also met people who don't have even a bachelor's level. I know a local plumber, and he is super articulate, super insightful, which is something that, as a much more arrogant person 10 years ago, I would not have, bought into that idea. But that's very much the case now, meeting people who aren't in higher education who have the same level of articulateness as someone who has gone to university.
Yeah, and then there's the question too of like how much the intrinsic motivation is important. Like when you go to school, is that a better way to get the information necessarily than like your own intrinsic curiosity and like seeking things out on your own?
Right.
Especially when it comes to something like philosophy, because the schools for that are so I don't want to say biased, but there's like very specific lanes and there's like almost a form of indoctrination and like specific schools of thought that like each school will engage in,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like you just reading stuff on your own and figuring it out. So I think with that kind of stuff, it kind of depends on what it is you're studying, like whether or not it's better to learn it on your own or get it from an institution.
True. Yeah, and I might be a little off the mark, but I've always kind of thought that a degree, the reason nowadays that you get a degree, like in the information age, because everything is so readily accessible. Even if you want to learn a trade, right? Like maybe you can't practice the trade like physically online or whatever, but you can learn everything that you need to do up until that point online, right? Um, I've always kind of thought like the point of a degree nowadays is like it kind of contradicts with what I just said, but like basically it's to get a job, it's to make qualifications to get a job, and two, to make connections. I feel like that like going to university is basically one of the greatest networking opportunities you'll ever have in your life if you utilize it correctly, right? Especially if like, okay, hey, I hold a master's or a doctorate or hell, I mean, I guess even a bachelor's from this institution in this field. Um, here's all the people I'm connected to on LinkedIn. I mean, jobs and money is everywhere, and people always need someone with relevant experience to something that you've done, right? You just have to like go do the groundwork, and going to university covers a lot of that groundwork for you, I think, or at least opens up a lot of those doors.
That's very important because my undergrad was in history and international relations, which is a fine degree. I mean, it wasn't so fine in the post 2008 world, but I had somebody. So I did history and international relations, and then but I didn't do anything extra. When you take a soft science in university, expectation is to make those connections. Particularly the older universities, the higher quality universities have those connections with the industry. As somebody else that did anthropology and international relations, and I originally was doing anthropology and international relations, but I ended up thinking anthropology was just reading all these like these diary entries from white explorers. I was like, this is bullshit. I'm not. That's why I switched to history. But she went ahead and worked for the European Commission. So she goes to all these like international conferences, not quite a diplomat, but working in that sort of field. And
Yeah.
that is primarily because she made use of the connections that the school was providing. I want to go back to what you just said about I want to pay special attention, and also what Rumba said to Wikipedia, because I spent a copious amount of my late teens and early 20s reading Wikipedia. And so when you do a subject like, let's take history, for example, you can consume that all from Wikipedia. But actually, I'm finding something like this as valuable as for me, if I was to like rethink university, sure, reading, but having these conversations as well. I don't think some people are like, oh, you can just for history, you can just read Wikipedia. It's like, no, you have to have discussion, or philosophy. You need to have discussions like that. In my opinion, that's non-negotiable. If you want to be learned, you need to have these kind of groups to talk with and to talk about the topic. It's not enough just to read it, because then you end up with some weird. I don't know if you know what like verbos are, like weeboos, and you have like verbos from like who are really obsessed with like Nazi Germany, the Nazi Wehrmacht kind of thing. You get people that get very single-minded about, or people that are really into like the Crusades history and the Roman Empire and all this kind of stuff, and that's because they just read Wikipedia stuff and they didn't engage in a community of intellectuals. I just think that community of intellectuals doesn't necessarily have to be in a higher education setting.
Right. Yeah, because I mean
Yeah.
that's the point of the group, right? Is to kind of bring your thinking back in line to acceptable norms. But I cut you off. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say pretty much the same thing. Yeah, like being able to contextualize stuff and bounce ideas off of other people. I
Yeah.
think in this age where we have such easy access to information, really the most important skill that we need to learn, which could be learned like up through high school, just in regular school, is how to parse information, how to think critically, how to like find and sort information effectively. But the whole memorization of information is not really as important anymore because we can find it. Like trade skills are still important, and then critical thinking is incredibly important. But then aside from that, like the discussions is the thing that you can get in like higher education that you can't just like get from Googling things like from Wikipedia.
What do you mean? I discuss whenever I go to college online. I go to those little comment sections and I leave my 3 discussion posts. You
Oh
know?
Yeah.
God. It's so awful. Like my degree, so I started out in a brick and mortar school, and I couldn't decide on a major, so I ended up like stopping that, and then I later finished my degrees with an online school, and it was literally just a validation of shit that I already knew. It's like, oh, you know this stuff, like here's your magic paper that says you're smart or whatever. But like I can't imagine learning things from that environment. Like at that point, it's just the same as you, because they give you all the same resources that already exist online. They're like, here, go watch this crash course video, go check out these articles or whatever. Like, you can find all that shit on your own. So really all they're giving you is a syllabus. Like, they're putting shit in order for you.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, the comment sections, like the discussion forums in there, it's...
Yeah, that pushed me away immediately. Like, I did one class online for the only online linguistics degree bachelor's available, and I was just like, what is this? What am I doing? This is not fun. This is not even kind of interesting. No, absolutely not. And then eventually I was like, okay, I'm burnt out. I want to go back to college. And they pulled on the only online bachelor's, linguistics bachelor's, whatever. That's a side note.
So my online experience was very different, and I was surprised to learn that. So I did my USC masters, and that had 9 hours of classes a week, and I'm in live classes. You had to be plugged in, your camera had to be on, and you had to be there. And you had 3 hours, so a whole 3 hours. I was at my desk, and they would do breakout groups, and you do discussions, and you do assignments, and then two 2-hour classes. So that's what I thought. Oh, okay. I guess online school is, to me, that was very close to what my experiences was doing during undergrad. So like, oh, this is fine. This is an online thing. It's this is the real deal. But from what I'm hearing from you, and I also from what I'm understanding when I'm researching online doctorates, they are what's called asynchronous doing these doctorates. So it's just like this. I don't want to do a doctorate where I'm just like posting on a effing forum like once a week.
That's the difference, synchronous versus asynchronous. Because the class that I teach, it's like a leadership course or whatever, and it is worth college credits. Like, it's an accredited course, but ours is synchronous. So we do that. We have the students logged in on camera for the 8-hour school day or whatever, and we do the discussions live. And it's not like the barrier to conversation is a little weird compared to a classroom. Like, when you're in a classroom, it's a lot easier to talk and have those conversations. But I feel like that environment is a lot different than like the experience that I've had with my asynchronous online degree, which is pretty fucking useless, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you're at a school with a synchronous online program, I feel like that's not too much different from the brick and mortar.
Yeah, I've noticed people will talk in the text box. I was using Adobe Connect, so I would DM people like during the class and talk with them privately. The instructor can see that you're DMing people. They can't see your conversation. So that was pretty, and that helped reinforce those bonds. And like, I would make friends with people online in my online classes in the exact same way I would make. You basically kind of like whispering to each other in a lecture hall. So I mean, that might be a solution. Is to just, if we're talking solutions, is to just get rid of async sort of online school as a concept. Is you can have an online school, just you can only do it. I mean, there's no way to enforce this, but yeah, async is just.
I think the goal, like, if the goal is to raise the bar of quality for education, then yeah, probably get rid of async education, right? But I think something that you kind of brought up in the opener is like, or maybe it was even in the pre-recording discussion, there's so many people with very busy lives and very different schedules and very different budgets, right? Like, asynchronous is kind of just a part of our lives now with a lot of different, like, not just schooling, just asynchronous facets of life all over the place, especially because the internet facilitates it so well. So I feel like there has to be like a middle solution, right?
There's this local online university, not local, regional online university that a lot of teachers use. It's called Western Governors University, WGU, and I'm always hearing them talking about this. It's like, oh, I completed my master's degree here in 3 months, and they're talking about how easy it is because it's asynchronous. It's also self-paced. You can go through it as quickly or as slowly as you want. And to me, I'm just kind of like frustrated because um, it's sort of like a joke. Then it's just kind of reducing what we have in the United States, particularly. You have diploma inflation, where you now need it. Now everyone has now the masters is the expectation and whatnot. But yeah, that system was great for people who are busy, but those of us who, I worked my butt off in a 9 synchronous hours a week. That's a 3 hours an evening, like fucking 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Every week. I felt like I actually worked for my master's degree, or at least not even worked, but at least spent time. People are gonna just say, yeah, I did my master's degree in 3 months. Like, are they equal? But yeah, then so I guess that'll go to the discussion about job requirements, because even the let's take even in the military, for the enlisted, like the whole purpose in the military, we have the officers who are the noble class, right? And the enlisted are like the peasant class. But even the enlisted forces are being required to get degrees, and I'm like, why? The whole fucking point of them becoming enlisted was to not get a degree, and there's literally no reason for someone in the enlisted force to get a degree, and it's particularly when it's a field that values experience, it values these down-to-earth sort of skills. And I'm not even just seeing this in the enlisted force as well. I'm of the military, seeing it. You're getting bachelors in very like down-to-earth into subjects which would otherwise be certifications. I think even business, it was originally a field where you don't get a higher education in it. You get like almost like an apprenticeship in it, if even that. And now business, you have business studies, MBA. So why are employers requiring degrees to begin with? And then I think that might be a core reason as to why we have a lot of inflation in degree. Are these expectations to get a degree in fields you don't need a degree in?
It's a great fucking question. Who the fuck has the answer to that one? Because, yeah, I mean, like, why do you need an MBA in business to do whatever mundane job you're going to be doing? That makes no fucking sense. I think they're all just seeing their peers do it almost, or like their peers and their predecessors do it. So it's like, okay, well, this is something my employees need too. Everyone's getting degrees. Everyone has degrees. Like, have y'all seen the Diablo announcement, the Diablo mobile announcement, or like, y'all have phones, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just kind of assumed that everyone's going through the motions anyway. So let's hire someone that can it's basically that piece of paper is proof that you can dedicate yourself to a task for longer than a few months. That's pretty much what it is. Unless you're in debt, so you need the job.
Yeah, it's a financial barrier to entry. There's the debt aspect, and then there's just, it's just become like the norm. So if you have two candidates that like are equally experienced or whatever, one has a degree and one doesn't, like, does the degree matter? Not really, but like if that's the norm now, then it's just expected that you have one. And even commercial certifications for technical fields, it's just as bad, because you just pay like $1,000 and take a test, and then you're pretty much assured to pass. Like, they'll just keep letting you retest until you pass because you paid the money. So you want this like CTT plus certification for whatever technical field you're in, like, you literally just pay the money and then eventually get the thing, and then you can put it on your LinkedIn or whatever.
Yeah, and that's the certification. Oh, I don't know why I jumped in like, oh yeah, and I completely brain dumped what I was gonna say. I mean, that would be, that goes back to what I said about, well, if you make all higher education free, then you eliminate that problem.
One thing that's kind of cool. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
In England, they have the Open University, which is an asynchronous online degree, but they have professors from like really prominent educational institutions who come there and teach. And it was specifically made to make education accessible to everyone, like the working class or whatever. And so you can get the same caliber of information that you could at a higher institution, but like asynchronously and much cheaper. And I've had a couple of professors who got their degrees through there, and they have lots of different stuff. And you can, obviously, since it's online, you can do it from anywhere. So I was actually considering getting a degree from there. But I think that kind of thing is kind of cool.
I recall when I was growing up, I would see TV ads for Open University. I didn't really understand it because I was a sheltered kid in my teens. But yeah, so that's it. Just, yeah, you have that, and then there's another thing. I don't know if you've seen the ads for it on social media. It's called Outlier. That's weird. These target ads, like, they make it seem like this is something that everyone's surely gonna fucking see because it's so, but then like nobody does. So it's basically it's classes like 100 level classes to satisfy general education requirements, which is not a thing in Europe. You don't take general education. So bachelors are normally 3 years, and you only do your degree. But in the US, you have to do math, even though you're not a math major and whatnot. So they have these higher caliber professors teach these courses. So I don't know if it's synchronous or asynchronous, but you've got I forget that football player who's like a mathematician now. I forget, and he's like studying his PhD. I forgot what his name is. But yeah, I think I see like so many comments on social media about, oh, you can just read history online, and I think some people don't recognize the value of a really good professor who knows their shit. And these can be like, they're a 1 hour lecture with them or 2 hour lecture with them cannot be replaced by reading something on Wikipedia. Literally is not replaceable by anything. Because that professor is such a high quality. I think people who haven't gone to a synchronous university experience don't understand that, what it's like to have a seriously high quality professor.
That's a really good that's a really good point. I don't even know if that's the case though. Is asynchronous? I mean, I think asynchronous is probably less effective for sure. Definitely less effective for some reasons, but if the school is providing its own professors' curriculums and their own pre-recorded lectures and things that you couldn't get anywhere else, is there something necessarily wrong with the asynchronous approach in that way? Like if you have quality professors giving quality lectures and stuff?
I don't know if it's called Outlier. I don't know if it is asynchronous or synchronous. If it is async, then yeah, it's just like, well, what's stopping them from you watching their videos on YouTube, like Slavoj Žižek or something. But I definitely think if you're gonna have when I say the quality of having, so yeah, okay, fine, I did say lecture, but just having that professor, having
perspective.
having the small class, emailing them, interacting them, having them grade your papers, visiting them in the office, those sort of experiences.
Yeah, it's irreplaceable.
Yeah,
because asynchronous can be done in a way that's conducive to learning. Like in my experience, it's often not, because the easiest route is just to put some links out there and then have them write their papers and just grade from there. But like I've also taken some classes where the professors were actually really engaged and they made you really interact with the material, or they pre-recorded lectures of themselves that you had to watch. But from my experience, like that's not really the norm, because it does take more effort. And the thing about asynchronous classes is, especially in a for-profit type of situation, you can up the number of students and you can make more money. So you can throw like 60 students in there, and if it's fully asynchronous and you're not engaging with them too much, like you can just bank money, and like they have to do all the work themselves. But yeah, that whole the contextualizing aspect of a professor who really knows their shit is fucking phenomenal, because that's one of the most amazing experiences I had in my brick and mortar school. Was my history professor and my anthropology professor. She was the same lady, and she was so fucking knowledgeable. Like, she would, instead of just having us read shit, like, she could just spout off all of this fucking history and all of this like stuff related to anthropology and tie it all together in a way where you could see how all the pieces fit together. So instead of just looking at independent Wikipedia articles and like having this random information in various areas, like having that person who actually is knowledgeable on the subject be able to put it all together in a way that you can engage with it and then have like meaningful discussions, that is fucking fantastic.
Sort of, yeah. I don't say so that format, Roomba. So you mentioned discussions and questions, but percentage-wise, how much of that information osmosis you got from her was just her talking? Was it most of it about?
It was a majority lecture-based, yeah, class.
It's interesting because like there's definitely there's no relationship, but then compared to my experience as a K-12 teacher, K-12 and higher education, because K-12 is compulsory, so the kids have to be in that room. So direct instruction, as it's called, is not looked upon favorably, whereas so I favor direct instruction. So for my honors kids, they very much respond very well to it because they are in the honors class. So to them, it's like, oh, I want to be here, kind of whatnot. But for my other classes, it's just like you can't do direct instruction, blah blah blah. But yeah, in university, getting up there and lecturing, that's just like what people like want that. Like they want that person to be very knowledgeable. How did they guarantee, when you said that some pre-recorded their lectures and you had to watch them, what was the accountability in terms of them knowing that you watched it? Was there like a worksheet you had to complete or some sort of tasks? Or
Yeah. So the pre-recorded lecture ones, I had one that was an Eastern philosophy class, and she was just an incredibly tough professor. Like, she had her lectures where she kind of explained things, but she also had us read the material, and then her expectations for what we did for our writing assignments every week and responding were tough. Like, she actually made you like get into the material. And then the other one that I had that was like that, it was a math class. So he would do the lectures where he showed you how to do the stuff, and then you would have to do it for the tests and stuff like that. But the majority of them, like, that was 2 out of however many online classes I took that actually put in the effort to have accountability and lectures for us to watch.
there is, it's another thing you mentioned in an Eastern philosophy class. It's also worth pointing out the difference, at least between the American and the British higher education system. So the American, I'm sort of laughing at, like, my friend is doing like some history and political science courses, and he's showing me some of their test stuff. It's like multiple choice. I'm just kind of laughing, like, wow, you're still doing multiple choice in university. It's kind of embarrassing. But one thing I noticed in American universities is that assignments are pretty frequent and like every week, pretty much. Whereas in my experience, when I took all my history and international relations classes, you had one paper for the whole thing, for the whole semester, and one final exam. That was it. So it might have been like 60% final exam, 40% essay. And then that exam, it'll be 12 questions. And you have 3 hours and you pick 3. So you're writing 3 1-hour essays for the final exam, and then your essays are going to be pretty long. Of course, what that meant for me is that I wouldn't fucking show up to any of that. Some semesters I didn't show up to any of the lectures. We had lectures, I don't know, and we call them tutorials. So tutorials are the smaller classes of about 12 to 20 students, and then lectures and whatnot. Lectures, they don't record attendance, except one class that we did record attendance for lectures. I just never fucking show up to lectures. I would show up to the tutorials. I'd miss my 2. I'd miss my 3rd one and then appeal it. So there was poor, and then I graduated with the second highest degree classification called a 2-1. It's not really based on GPA, but the quality of the expectation was pretty damn high in terms of what you had to be producing.
Yeah.
That the essay you had to produce was gonna be very like I would never receive a sort of A on the essay because it wasn't something that the expectation is that it's assigned at the beginning of the semester and you go back and forth. Like there's none of this like do this essay in this week. You're working on it for the whole half semester until it is due, and you're sending it back to professor, sending it back to you. So you would produce one single product for that class for that semester, and then you take that final exam, which is 3 hours long by the time you reach your last year. As American students, how does that sound compared to the American system of we have an assignment every single week?
I found it depends on the class. If it's a general ed class that everyone has to take, then it's a lot more multiple choice and a lot more like homework every week. As you get more abstracted into the higher level courses, then it'll be either 3 papers for the semester, or I have had a few classes where it was 1 and you just slowly worked on it throughout the semester and had like back and forth with the professor. So it kind of depends on what level you're at and also what kind of degree, because the more sciencey the degree, kind of the more like lab work and like homework and quizzes you seem to have every week, as opposed to like my philosophy or psychology classes where like you just have 2 to 3 papers for the entire semester and that's pretty much it, besides just your weekly like back and forth with the other students.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like my college now is a little bit different than I guess like your standard college. I mean, it's technically a college, but yeah, we don't do multiple choice. Like we don't do anything like that. We're expected to produce everything all the time, right? Open-ended everything. I think that's how it should be for one. And for two, yeah, we have like longer term projects of like this is kind of what we expect of you to get done throughout the time. And or like we have like a culture studies or whatever that has to relate to our topic culture that we're studying, right? And basically, I have to have like a large project done by a certain date, and it's just one thing, just one paper, and then one oral presentation, pretty much. Um, it almost sounds
That's good.
like they're getting you ready for like for your dissertation later on in your career, your educational career.
Yeah. So typically the last, because in at least the UK, bachelor's is 3 years, master's is 1 year, whereas here bachelor's is 4 years, master's is 2 years. By your last year of undergrad in the UK, you're doing what we consider masters over here. And I did do my dissertation. Yeah, last year was dissertation year, and I scored terribly on it because I didn't meet with my professor once. I think mine had to be 12, 20,000 words or something, and this is for undergrad, something ridiculous like that, 15 to 20,000 words for undergrad, which I don't know if that's anything, but yeah, I think I did it in one night.
Oh, Jesus.
I think,
That's so
or
many
like a
words.
couple. Yeah, and again, it's just so that dissertation was an entire class, so you didn't do anything else. So when you had like the 2 to 3 classes for that semester, one was just called dissertation. So yeah, and I totally squandered the opportunity. I would love to repeat my bachelor's experience at this age, because I'd be much more engaged with it. But looking at my options as a father of 2, with all my different obligations that we talked about earlier, these online options are like, even looking at my doctorates, they're all async, and I'm like, I don't fucking want an async doctorate. I want to actually like be legit about it and have gone online. And no, they are out there. They are like online doctorate programs, but you have to like meet for like a weekend at like a retreat for like like for summer, like or something. So which is sort of neat. That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
But once again, what is the one thing we haven't been able to do is like the root cause, like why is there a degree inflation? And Cypher, you said because I haven't seen this discussed. This might go back to American culture, right? So, which is something that I think we can broach quite comfortably. So in the UK, there are two social classes: the working and middle class, right? But there's different. So the working class look down on the middle class, and the middle class look down on the working class. So I have a friend. He's proudly working class. He is a escalator technician, earns great money, considers university to be a waste of time, to be it's just a piece of paper, and I don't want to go to fucking university. I don't know what that was. I was supposed to be my Cockney accent, which I can normally do. Because I'm from that area of London. So the working class will, whereas in the US, the expectation is that mythological middle class. So even if you are a HVAC technician, your goal is to send your kids to college. Whereas my friend would never consider sending his kids to university.
Yeah.
His father was a skilled technician, earn good money. And then his son was a thing. But here in this country, you might be dirt poor, earn great money in a trade that we've been talking about, but your goal is to send your kids, is to get that 2.5 kids, white picket fence,
American dream,
and your kids to university. So there might be some sort of cultural factor, expectation that everyone should go to university. Everyone should go to college has caused this degree inflation. Whereas at least in other countries, particularly in countries where it's free, or have a slightly different class dynamic, there has not been an inflation, a diploma inflation.
Yeah, that's actually a really good angle to approach it from, I think, because like you said, our class dynamic's a lot different in the States. Like someone of a lower socioeconomic class, like their goal is always, I feel like, to rise to a higher socioeconomic class, and then their goal is to rise to a higher socioeconomic class. Like everyone's just trying to get as far above in the rat race as they possibly can. Like that's everyone's goal, right? More money, more comfort, college, etc. And then college is kind of seen as the keys to the kingdom. Well, if you want a nice paying job, if you don't want to be sitting in this trailer park your whole life or living in your tiny little hometown, podunk fucking nowhere, you need to get to college, and like this idea is perpetuated even at the lowest family level, right? It's not even, but where exactly the perpetuation starts is a different question, because it could be perpetuated at the lowest family level, like your mom telling you to get a degree because all the employers are asking for a degree, or
what you mentioned about geography, that's what I didn't consider, because the whole, we said podunk town, leaving in a place like Europe, which is a lot more metropolitan.
Yeah.
In the US, you're in the middle of fucking nowhere, and going to college is seen as a way to escape and actually see shit.
Yeah.
Whereas in Europe, a working class family can still get by decently and still have decent experiences going to on a low cost vacation to somewhere, and still see all this stuff. So you don't have to be, you can still be working class in Europe and not necessarily be closed off from experiences because of trains and low cost flights and just geography. Whereas in the US, college is seen as a way to escape, is to get out. And I think what's probably happened then is that has perpetuated through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, the idea of going to college. And then as we enter the internet age, it's just sort of branched. And it's different in the sense of what it's for, because it's not for that idea of escaping your hometown, but because there was that expectation anyway of everyone has to go to college, they just kind of create a sort of a adjacent lane. So there is a bit of a cultural and geography, sort of sociological aspect to it as well, and it just seems to have branched off into this weird masters in real estate. And I was like, what the fuck is that masters in real estate? Like that
What is
really kind of frustrated me viscerally to see that.
I want to interview someone on here that has a master's in real estate. I need to know what they do.
I have a
Because
friend
again,
who's like really involved in the real estate community. Like, we should see. He might know. He might know people.
right, because I mean, these subjects don't need they don't need they don't need a sort of academic angle to them, and they're very much vocational, like down to earth, like stuff, the experiences. So what is, I mean, even my degree was a little bit vocational. I got a Master of Arts in teaching, not master of education. So, and I'm curious about the MBA as well. I think the MBA is a big one, the whole field of business, or data. There's so many, like in the past, you didn't take business studies, you took economics. You didn't take data science as a subject, because if you took like a regular university subject, those would have data science in it anyway. So you don't need to take a dedicated data science degree. But yeah, there's this glut of, I don't know. I'm really disillusioned with it, because to me, and it's a bit of an arrogance thing. For me, it's like I wanted to, like, for me, this is something that I'm personally good at, is higher education.
Yeah.
That's good for me, and I don't like that it's just been commodified.
Well, tough titties.
Commodify, which is what capitalism does.
Yeah.
So
I think inflation is the right term because it's very analogous to the housing bubble. Like, we offered student loans, and so a lot of people who couldn't really afford education got education, the same way a lot of people who couldn't really afford houses got houses. And we're getting to the point now where that bubble is being sustained by government intervention to an extent, to where it's really just milking people. But like, especially with the labor shortage that we're experiencing right now post COVID, I think everyone is aware that this is a problem, and there's like a few different directions we could go in with it, which is either like what the more conservative people want, which is where you limit higher education to those who can afford it or who want these more abstracted things. Maybe a 2-year vocational thing, continuation of high school is like covered, like free, but otherwise, like, not everyone should need college. Or you have like the other flip side where they're like, college should be free for everyone, the fucking Bernie bros or whatever. And either way, like, it's coming to a head. Like, something is going to happen with it. So we'll see which direction we decide to go in the US, which is a very strong libertarian streak, and we like to go in both different directions at once, to where our solution doesn't actually fix any of the problems, because the parties pick at what the other one proposes, to the point where everything is completely toothless and like useless. But yeah, it's like a housing bubble, but for education. So we'll see what happens
when people stop going to college, and then
start.
Yeah, and then what? Then some like I'm wondering, like, people stop going to college. What's going to happen to? You have this concentration of all these like data analysis, business studies, fucking real estate, blah blah blah, blah, and then people stop going because of this bubble. What's going to happen to all the traditional subjects that people aren't doing their masters in, aren't doing their PhDs in? So like history, psychology, philosophy, biology. Maybe then it will burst and university will shrink back to its original purpose. Because I'm just thinking, if people aren't doing PhDs in the history, psychology. I mean, I have to look. This is something where you'd actually have to look at numbers.
Yeah.
People aren't doing PhDs in the old school subjects, even math, all that basic stuff. What's going to happen when the bubble bursts and people stop going to university? Of other subjects do, particularly even then, particularly in the US where general education is needed. I don't know. Well,
Yeah, it's a
I'm
great
curious,
question.
and we'll see.
I guess it could, in theory, it gets more elite again, right? Like it regains some of its status because it's now, um, what's the word? More scarce, I guess. Um, but also, I mean, I think the U.S. is also on a pretty heavy anti-intellectual streak too. So maybe it does just kind of dwindle, right? Maybe education, we'll just outsource it somewhere else, some other country that gives a shit.
Yep, the Chinese will come in and take over all the higher education spots.
Yeah.
Mm.
Run all of our
That,
philosophy courses through Confucius thought.
Hell yeah,
Hell yeah.
I'm cool with that. All right, well, I don't think we're gonna solve this crisis today between the three of us, although we are very smart and well educated. But I think
I
we
think the idea of it being a bubble was the good concluding point.
Yeah. No, it's a good
Oh.
take. It's a good
So
take.
my takeaway is that I'm gonna get a completely useless philosophy degree just to jerk myself off because it makes me feel good.
Agreed
Yeah, I
100%.
mean that's totally what I fucking think it should be. I want to have a doctorate to fucking jerk myself off. I don't.
That's
It's just there. It's for people who it's a way to like validate people who are into
the way
that
to
kind
just
of
walk
stuff.
into the room and just fucking fling your dick on the table. Like,
Why? I mean,
I
no, it's
got
just
this.
like I don't know. I mean, it might also be a complex on my part as like someone that was pretty good at school and then sort of fucking entered the real world and wasn't sort of like as good at it in school as in school. So like, no, fucking, I need to go back to feeling good about myself. So I know there's all these fucking dumb people now that have flooded university, so I'm fucking like real world people have infected my safe space of education.
Yeah. Well, who knows?
Get them back in their place.
Can't relate. Um, well, appreciate y'all coming out and hanging with us. I think that kind of
Right, yeah,
concludes our
outros.
education. Yeah, it kind of concludes at least part one of our educational discussion. I think as more things
Uh,
come into light.
Cypher mentioned anti-intellectualism, so that's something
True.
that we should maybe
Very
think about.
true. Yeah. There's a lot of education touches all facets of life, so I'm sure it'll get brought up plenty more. So appreciate it. Once again, I'm Cypher. This is 17 Roomba, and this is the Anecdotalist.